The chandeliers burned like captured stars above the ballroom, their light glancing off every jeweled crown and polished blade. Music swelled, violins and flutes weaving through laughter sharp as crystal. Beneath the golden arches of Mooncrest Palace, 100 princesses glided in silken perfume, each rehearsing smiles meant for one man. King Caeldraven stood at the end of the marble hall, wrapped in black and silver. His posture was effortless command, his gaze unreadable. Every woman there desired that gaze to linger, but it did not. It slid over them like frost over glass. The crowd whispered about his power, how his wolf lay chained beneath his skin, how he'd ended wars with a single growl. Yet none dared to look too long at his eyes, pale as winter lightning. Behind the pillars, a young maid moved quietly with a tray of goblets. Leora Vale kept her head bowed, trying not to trip over her own trembling feet. Servants were meant to be invisible, but the air tonight hummed with tension that made her heart race. She could feel his presence even from across the room, heavy and magnetic. When one of the goblets slipped and clattered to the floor, the sound cracked through the music like thunder. Every face turned. 100 jeweled eyes burned into her. I'm sorry, your majesties," she whispered, kneeling to gather the shards. Blood welled on her fingers where the glass cut deep. Before she could rise, a voice, calm, low, commanding, cut through the noise. "Stop." Boots crossed the marble. The king himself. Leora froze. He knelt beside her, and the ballroom fell deathly silent. His gloved hand brushed her wrist aside. "You're bleeding," he said, more softly than she expected. Then he tore a strip from his sleeve and wrapped it around her hand with careful precision. The crowd's silence thickened into disbelief. No king touched a servant. Ever, the music faltered. Princess Celine of Arvanur stepped forward, her beauty sharp as a blade. "A generous act, your majesty," she said, her smile thin. "But perhaps your pity is wasted on those who should know their place." Her gaze lingered on Leora like poison. Cale rose slowly. "Perhaps," he said, tone neutral, "some of us have forgotten what place means." He turned away, leaving Celine's smile to crumble. Leora's pulse thundered. The cloth around her hand was still warm from his touch. She whispered her thanks, but he was already gone, swallowed by the sea of courtiers. When the music resumed, it sounded hollow. The princesses returned to their dance, but their laughter came brittle now. Whispers hissed between them. The king touched her hand. A maid, perhaps his curse has driven him mad. Later that night, as candles guttered low, Leora retreated to the servants' corridor. Her palm throbbed beneath the linen. She should have been invisible again, forgotten. But when she reached the corner, the air shifted. He was there waiting. Cale stood against the stone wall, moonlight cutting across his face. The sight of him up close stole her breath. The faint scent of steel and pine clung to him. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, voice barely a whisper. He regarded her for a long, unblinking moment. "I came to make sure you weren't dismissed." "I won't be." Lady Morris said the princess only wanted to humiliate me. Celine's name flickered across his face like a shadow. "She'll try again," he murmured. Leora swallowed. "Then let her. I can endure it." "You shouldn't have to." The words escaped him before he could leash them. His jaw tightened. "Forget tonight. Forget me." She hesitated, then said softly, "As you wish, my king." But something in her tone, gentle, defiant, made his breath catch. For one heartbeat, the room felt too small to contain them both. Then he stepped back, as if burned. "Go," he said, voice rough. "Before I forget myself." She fled down the corridor, heart shattering with something she couldn't name. Outside, wind rose against the palace walls, carrying the faint scent of rain and something darker iron, maybe blood. Leora paused near a window, staring into the courtyard below. Moonlight shimmered over the marble fountains. Everything looked serene, but the air felt wrong. She turned to leave and nearly collided with Elder Fenric, the royal seer. His pale eyes glimmered beneath his hood. "Strange winds tonight," he murmured. "The moon stirs restlessly." Leora forced a polite smile. "Forgive me, Elder, I must return." "You dream of wolves, don't you?" he interrupted, her breath caught. "How would you?" "The moon remembers what the world forgets," he said, stepping past her. "Be careful where its light touches you, child. Some fates are written in silver fire." He left her trembling. That night, she couldn't sleep. The memory of Kale's eyes haunted her, the strange, sorrowful hunger there. She pressed her bandaged hand to her chest, feeling the faint warmth still pulsing through it. Somewhere beyond the walls, a howl tore through the night. It was too close, too human. Servants screamed in the distance, guards shouted orders. Leora ran to the window again. In the courtyard below, torches flared. Something moved in the shadows, a blur of fur and silver eyes, then silence. Moments later, bells rang. Someone shouted that one of the princesses had been found in the garden, her throat marked by teeth that left no trace of scent. Leora's heart pounded. She stumbled back from the window, her knees weak. When she lifted her hand, she saw a thin smear of red across her palm. The cut reopened, glowing faintly under the moonlight. In the echoing corridors of the palace, the Alpha King stood alone, staring at the same moon. His hands trembled as though something deep within him had awakened, and neither of them knew that this night, the night of spilled blood and forbidden touch, had already bound their fates, and before the next moon rose, the kingdom would whisper her name as both curse and salvation. Morning came muted beneath a veil of storm clouds. The palace was quieter than usual, as though it too held its breath after the night's horror. Servants whispered that the princess's body had been carried away before dawn, her skin drained of color, her eyes open in eternal shock. None dared to speak the word wolf. Not when their king's temper already simmered like thunder behind stone walls. Leora kept her head down, scrubbing the marble floors outside the throne chamber, trying to ignore the trembling in her hands. She could still hear that howl, see those silver eyes glinting in the dark. The world she knew, the safe, ordinary rhythm of servitude, had fractured. The heavy doors opened suddenly. Kale stepped out, his expression carved from ice. Every guard bowed. Leora bowed too, but his voice stopped her. "You stay." Her stomach nodded. When the others withdrew, Kale's gaze pinned her in place. "You were near the East Garden last night," he said. "You saw something." She hesitated. "Only shadows, my king." "Lies." The word came low, not cruel, but dangerous. He took a step closer, the air tightening. "You smelled it. Felt it." Her breath stuttered. "What was it?" His eyes, pale and bright, met hers. "Something I thought I'd buried long ago." Then, softer, as if speaking to himself, "and something it seems intent on finding again." He turned away before she could ask more. "You'll no longer serve in the lower quarters," he said abruptly. "From this day, you'll attend in my private wing." She blinked. "Your Majesty, that's an order." His tone allowed no argument. By sunset, she found herself inside the king's private quarters, rooms that smelled faintly of cedar, steel, and storm. She moved silently, lighting candles, arranging his armor for repair. The silence between them stretched taut, filled with the hum of unspoken thoughts. When she reached to pour wine into his goblet, her sleeve brushed his arm. His muscles tensed. She pulled back quickly, whispering, "Forgive me." He caught her wrist. Not roughly, but firmly enough that her pulse leapt beneath his fingers. "That scent," he murmured, more to himself than her. "Rain and jasmine." He inhaled sharply, as though scent alone could steady him. "Leave before I forget my restraint." She fled, heart pounding, but the sound of her own footsteps followed her like an echo she couldn't outrun. The following days were a blur of rumors. Some said the king had taken a lover, others whispered that a curse had returned to Mooncrest. Leora tried to ignore them, but even in the kitchens, glances lingered on her too long. Then came the royal hunt. Kale rode ahead of his retinue, his silver stallion cutting through the mist-laden forest. Leora had been ordered to accompany the servants tending the hounds. She stayed behind, near the clearing, while the horns echoed through the trees. The forest was alive with the scent of wet leaves and distant thunder. When Kale returned hours later, his armor torn and his horse trembling, something wild burned in his eyes. He dismounted heavily, his breath ragged. "Your Majesty?" Leora rushed forward. "You're hurt, stay back." His voice was rough, layered with something deeper. His hands shook violently. She stopped, but the sight of blood spreading across his collar made her step closer despite his warning. "Please," she whispered. "Let me help you." He sank to his knees, gasping, the veins along his throat glowing faintly under the skin. His body shuddered like a bowstring pulled too tight. "The moon," he growled. "It's too close." Then his eyes changed, silver bright, luminous, and feral. Leora froze. Bones strained beneath his skin, his teeth sharpening with a sound like breaking glass. Without thinking, she touched his face. Kale. The moment her hand met his cheek, the transformation halted. The glow faded. His breathing steadied, raw and human again. He caught her wrist, his grip trembling. "What did you do?" "I don't know." He stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. In the dying light, her palm glowed faintly, the same silver hue that had flickered through his veins. That night, Elder Fenric came to the king's chambers. Leora waited outside the door, listening as their voices murmured within. "She carries the mark," Fenric said. "Moonborn, though unawakened. The blood that once ruled before your line." Silence. Then Kale's voice, low and dangerous. "You mean she's a threat?" "I mean she's your key." Moments later, the door opened. Kale stepped out, his expression shadowed. "Pack your things," he said. "You'll leave the palace by dawn." Leora's heart dropped. "Have I displeased you?" His jaw flexed. "This place is no longer safe for you." She swallowed, trembling. "Then take me with you." "I can't," he said, almost breaking. "If you stay, they'll kill you." "If you follow me, I might." The next morning, she rode out of the palace in a covered carriage, escorted by 2 guards to a remote cottage at the edge of the royal forest. It was simple, lonely, and silent. Kale's last words echoed in her mind with every heartbeat. "If you follow me, I might." Days passed. She tried to find peace among the pines, scrubbing floors that no one would walk on, lighting a hearth for no one to warm beside. But each night, she dreamed of his eyes, how they burned when he looked at her, as though her very presence dragged something alive and dangerous from his depths. Then came the night of the storm. The wind howled through the trees, rattling shutters. Leora sat by the fire, clutching the bandage still wrapped around her palm. The flames wavered suddenly, bending backward as if pushed by an unseen hand. She rose slowly as the door burst open. A man in a royal guard's cloak staggered inside, only it wasn't a man. His eyes gleamed gold, his grin too wide, his teeth too sharp. "The king hides his treasure poorly," he hissed. Leora backed away. "Who are you?" "A messenger," he said, drawing a dagger slick with rain. "From those who think a maid should remember her place." Before he could strike, lightning split the sky, flooding the room with white light. Something inside her broke loose, a pressure, a pulse, a roar. Her vision blurred, her heartbeat thundered in her ears. When she raised her hands, they blazed with pale fire. The intruder screamed as silver flames swallowed him whole, then silence. Only the hiss of rain and the crackle of burning wood remained. Leora stared at her trembling hands, horror and wonder twisting through her chest. The glow faded slowly, leaving her breathless. Through the open doorway, the forest shimmered under the storm's light. Somewhere beyond the trees, a wolf howled, deep, commanding, and close enough that she felt it in her bones. Her pulse quickened. The sound was familiar. She stepped into the rain, the wind tearing at her hair. "Kale," she whispered, though no one was there to hear her. Far away, in the heart of the palace, the Alpha King stood at his balcony, head tilted to the storm, feeling her power ripple through the bond neither of them yet understood. The moon broke through the clouds, casting its silver light across both of them, two souls bound by something ancient, dangerous, and only beginning to awaken. Leora awoke to the scent of ash and pine. Dawn filtered weakly through the smoke rising from the ruined cottage, its embers still breathing. Her hands, once human, bore faint traces of silver light, like cracks in glass that refused to fade. The memory of the intruder's scream haunted her. She hadn't meant to kill him, hadn't even known she could. Now the forest felt different, watchful, alive. Whispering her name and the rustle of leaves, she stumbled to the stream and washed the soot from her skin. Her reflection shimmered strangely, her eyes caught light like polished moonstone. When she blinked, the glow vanished, but dread took root. Whatever had awakened inside her wasn't human. It was the same power she had seen trembling in the king. Hoofbeats broke the quiet. She turned sharply, heart hammering, as riders emerged from the mist. The banner they carried bore the sigil of Mooncrest. At their head rode Kale, cloaked dark with rain. He dismounted before the others halted. The sight of him, alive, fierce, eyes raw with exhaustion, sent something fierce through her chest. "You're alive," he said, voice rough. Relief and fury tangled within it. "I thought," he stopped himself, jaw tight, "they sent someone to kill me," she said quietly. "He didn't survive." Kale's gaze flicked to the scorched doorway. "I can see that." Then, more gently, "You used power you don't understand." "I didn't choose to." "Power never asks permission." His tone softened, but his eyes burned. "You shouldn't have been left alone." She wanted to ask if that meant he'd stay, but before the words could form, he turned toward his men. "We ride back to the palace. There are traitors to answer for." The ride back was silent. The kingdom seemed to shrink beneath gathering storm clouds, as if the sky itself sensed what was coming. When the gates of Mooncrest rose into view, Leora felt unease gnawing deep inside her. She could feel the eyes of the court already waiting. The hall was darker than she remembered. Guards lined the walls, and nobles filled the balconies above, their murmurs sharp as daggers. At the far end stood Lord Theron, Kale's most trusted advisor, his expression carved from cold marble. Princess Celine stood beside him, radiant in white, her smile perfectly practiced. "How poetic," Celine drawled, as Kale and Leora entered. The king returns from the woods with his maid, and the stench of witchcraft still clinging to her. Leora stiffened, but Kale's hand brushed hers in silent warning. "Mind your words, princess," he said. Theron stepped forward, holding a parchment sealed with the royal crest. "Your Majesty, an accusation has been made," he said smoothly. "This woman bears the mark of forbidden blood. The same mark that cursed the Northern dynasty a century ago. She is moonborn, a danger to the crown." The council erupted in murmurs. Kale's eyes narrowed. "You speak treason." "I speak truth," Theron replied, bowing just enough to mock respect. "Elder Fenric confirmed it before he died." Leora's breath caught. "Fenric, dead?" Celine's smile curved like a knife. "A tragic accident. He should have known better than to hide the truth." Kale's rage rippled through the room like heat. "Guards," but before he could command them, Theron lifted the parchment high. "By order of the council, she is to be confined until the next full moon, when her guilt will be judged before the gods." Steel sang as soldiers stepped forward. Kale's wolf stirred, his control trembled. "You dare give orders in my hall?" "Forgive me, Majesty," Theron said softly. "But even a king cannot overrule divine law." Leora met Kale's eyes, pleading, calm, a silent plea not to lose himself for her. He hesitated just long enough for the guards to seize her arms. They dragged her to the lower cells beneath the palace. The air there was damp and metallic. She could hear the ocean pounding against the cliffs beyond the stone walls. Alone, she curled against the cold floor, whispering his name. Hours passed. Then, a shuffle. A shadow slipped through the bars, a dying figure cloaked in blood. Elder Fenric. His eyes were clouded but knowing. "Child," he rasped, pressing a scroll into her hands. "Your power is not a curse, it is the crown the moon left behind. But love must awaken it, freely chosen, or all will burn." "Fenric, please," he smiled faintly, already fading. "The Alpha's heart will break before it heals. But when it does, the heavens themselves will tremble." He died before she could answer. Something cracked deep inside her, grief mingling with rage. The air shimmered. The bars began to hum. Silver light seeped through her palms until the metal melted like wax. The doors blew open with a whisper. She ran. Her bare feet struck stone, her breath echoing in the tunnels. Above, thunder rolled. When she burst into the great hall, chaos reigned. Kale stood surrounded by soldiers, sword drawn, his eyes silvered with fury. Across from him, Celine and Theron waited beside the throne, a goblet in her hand gleaming with dark liquid. "Stop!" Leora shouted, her voice carrying power that made the chandeliers tremble. Celine's smile didn't waver. "Too late. He's already tasted it." Kale staggered, the goblet slipping from his fingers. Blood blossomed through his tunic. Leora's scream shattered the silence. She caught him as he fell, his body heavy and trembling. "No, no, stay with me." Celine approached slowly, her voice smooth and cruel. "The kingdom will mourn a cursed king and his witch lover. Then I will cleanse it all in holy fire." Leora's tears struck the marble, glowing like molten stars. Kale's hand brushed her cheek, weak but still searching. "Don't let her win." His voice broke on a breath. "Leora, look at me." "I'm here," she whispered, clutching him tightly. He smiled faintly, eyes half-lidded. "I thought I could bury what I am. But you," his fingers grazed her throat, leaving warmth that seared straight to her heart. You make the monster remember it was once a man. His eyes closed. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then the moon broke through the storm clouds, flooding the hall with light. Leora felt it pull at her blood, at her soul, until something inside her erupted. Silver fire poured from her hands, racing across the floor. The soldiers fell to their knees, blinded. Celine's shriek echoed through the chamber as shadows flared to life around her, twisting, recoiling from the blaze. "What are you?" she screamed. Leora rose slowly, the fire curling around her like wings. "What you feared I would be," she said, voice steady. "The end of your lies." Kale lay still beside her, his blood glowing faintly where it touched her hands. The light spread between them, binding, pulsing, alive. The palace trembled. Somewhere deep in the earth, the wolves howled in answer. The silver flame dimmed just enough for her to see him breathe again, weak, but there. Relief flooded her, fragile and fleeting. Celine was gone, fled into the darkness. The council scattered like frightened birds, but the war she had ignited was only beginning, and the bond that had saved him might yet destroy them both. The dawn that followed the chaos was blood-red. Smoke still clung to the air above Mooncrest Palace, heavy with the scent of ruin and betrayal. The great hall lay in fragments, cracked marble, shattered glass, and silver residues seared into the walls where Leora's power had burned. She stood at the window, Kale's cloak draped around her shoulders, watching the storm clouds drift apart. The world below was silent, holding its breath. Kale had survived, but barely. His body bore marks that refused to fade, veins threaded faintly with light. When he stirred in his bed, his eyes no longer held only the fire of the Alpha, they carried a shimmer of moonlight. Their bond, forged in desperation, had changed him. Perhaps it had changed them both, still watching the world burn? His voice was soft but roughened with fatigue. Leora turned. He was leaning weakly against the bedpost, shirt loose, bandages tracing his ribs. Yet even weakened, he carried that same relentless authority. She crossed the room quickly, catching his arm before he stumbled. "You shouldn't be standing." He smiled faintly. "You shouldn't have saved me." "Would you rather I hadn't?" His silence was answer enough. He lifted a hand, brushing her jaw with his thumb. "I felt you," he murmured. "When the poison took me, I saw light. You called me back." She swallowed, unable to meet his eyes. "It wasn't me. It was the bond." "No," he said quietly. "It was you." Their stillness held for a moment, a fragile calm between storms. Then a knock sounded, sharp and urgent. A guard entered, bowing quickly. "Your Majesty, Lady Celine's forces have gathered beyond the eastern ridge. Lord Theron's banners fly with them. They mean to march before dusk." Kale's expression hardened. "How many?" "Thousands, sire. She's called the council to her cause. She claims divine right to cleanse the throne of moonborn taint." Leora's stomach twisted. "Then it's me she wants." "She'll have to go through me first," Kale said, voice low and final. "Kale," he turned to her, eyes bright with fury and something deeper. "I've fought wars for power, for pride, for territory. But this one I'll fight for truth. For you." She wanted to argue, to tell him that this wasn't his fight, that her existence was the spark that set the kingdom ablaze, but the words wouldn't come. He had already chosen. By dusk, the courtyard pulsed with the rhythm of war. Wolves in human form stood ready, their armor black as storm clouds, their eyes silvered in unity. Kale moved among them, his presence alone enough to steady fear. Leora watched from the steps, her cloak whipping in the wind, the mark on her skin faintly glowing beneath the fading light. She had tried to suppress it once, the gift that frightened her, the moonfire that had destroyed everything she touched. But Fenric's final words echoed through her, love must awaken it freely chosen. Now she understood. Power born of fear destroyed. Power born of love could protect. When Kale mounted his horse, he looked back at her. When this is over, I'll come back to you. Don't promise what you can't keep, she said, her voice trembling. He smiled, tired, real. Then I'll make sure I keep it. As the army thundered beyond the gates, Leora closed her eyes. The pull between them remained, faint but unbreakable, like a thread of silver spun through her veins. She felt every heartbeat that was his. Every pain that was hers. Hours passed before the first clash of steel reached the palace walls. The air vibrated with it, war cries, roars, the crackle of power meeting flesh. She couldn't stay still. The moment she felt Kale's pain, sharp, searing, she ran. The battlefield was chaos. Fire and fog blurred the horizon, and the smell of blood thickened the wind. Leora moved through the madness, her bare feet streaked with ash. Everywhere she looked, the fallen lay like broken constellations. Then she saw him. Kale was on his knees, sword buried in the earth, surrounded by Celine's guards. His armor was cracked, his breath ragged. Celine stood before him, her white gown now drenched in crimson, her eyes alight with holy fury. You could have ruled beside me, she hissed. Instead, you chose a witch. She's worth 10 of you, he spat, lifting his sword again though his hands shook. Then die with her. Celine raised her blade, but it never fell. Leora stepped between them, her hands outstretched. Silver light flared so bright the world seemed to dissolve. The shockwaves sent soldiers flying. Celine staggered back, shielding her eyes. You should have stayed dead, Celine snarled. Maybe, Leora said, her voice echoing with a resonance not entirely her own. But the moon remembers its daughters. She unleashed the power. It rippled through the air, pure and unstoppable. Celine screamed as her blade melted to liquid silver, as her form wavered and split into shadow. With one last, broken gasp, she vanished, consumed by her own ambition. When the light faded, silence fell. The army stood frozen, awed and trembling. Then, one by one, the wolves knelt. Leora turned to Kale. He was pale, blood slick on his arm, but alive. She dropped beside him, cradling his face, tears cutting clean lines through the soot on her skin. It's over, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Not yet. You still have a kingdom to rule. I don't want a throne. Then rule their hearts instead, he murmured. You already rule mine. Her breath caught. Kale, but he closed his eyes, exhaustion claiming him. For one terrible second, she thought she'd lost him again, but his pulse beat steady beneath her palm. Relief broke her composure, and she pressed her forehead to his. When dawn came again, it was soft and gold, the first gentle sunrise the kingdom had seen in months. The banners of Mooncrest rose over the ruins, no longer symbols of dominance but of survival. The people whispered her name not in fear, but in reverence. The moonborn queen Leora stood beside Kale on the balcony, overlooking the mists. He was still healing, the bond between them pulsing faintly like a heartbeat shared. Below, the wolves howled in harmony, a song not of war but of rebirth. She leaned against him, her voice quiet. The war is over, but the world feels unfinished. He looked at her, a slow smile curving his lips. Good. It means there's still something worth fighting for. She turned toward the horizon, where the moon lingered pale against the sunrise. Her hand found his, and their fingers laced together. For the first time, She didn't feel like something broken or cursed. She felt whole, the kingdom would rebuild. Shadows would return. Power would test them again, but for now, for this breath, this dawn, peace lived in their joined hands, and in the silver promise that bound their hearts beyond fate itself.